Hi, Glenn Loury here, host of The Glenn Show. I recently recorded 2 episodes of my friend Bob Wright's podcast. One about Charlie Kirk and another about Gaza. Here, I've combined them into one long episode so you'll have them both in one place. Now, normally only paying subscribers get episodes on Mondays and everyone else has to wait until Friday, but this time I'm going to release them both for free and paying subscribers today, Monday, September 29th. This Friday, October 3rd, I will be resuming my weekly live streams at 1 p.m. Eastern. Look for links to that soon at glennloury.substack.com. Anyone can watch and call into these live streams, and these live streams are great fun. But only subscribers will have access to the video of the live streams after it's over. So if you like starting your week with The Glenn Show and you like our weekly live streams, consider becoming a subscriber at glennloury.substack.com, a paying subscriber. You'll get that and much more, including monthly Q&As with my conversation partner, John Mittwater. That's glennloury.substack.com. And to those of you who already subscribe, thank you. The Glenn Show is almost entirely audience supported. We couldn't do what we do without you. Thanks a lot.
Hi, Glenn.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I got a lot of work on my shoulders, but I'm managing it somehow.
Well, I'm glad that you're letting me get in the way of that, and I'm sure our audience would be glad that you're pausing for our benefit. Let me introduce you. I'm Robert Wright, publisher of the Nonzero newsletter. This is the Nonzero podcast. You are Glenn Loury, an economist, a very well-known public intellectual, host of The Glenn Show, author of the book Late Admissions, which I promise people is unlike any memoir they've ever read before. You and I had a conversation about it some months ago. They can find that on YouTube or in the Nonzero podcast archives, but I would say skip the conversation, just buy the book. You won't regret it. Would you agree, Glenn? They should skip the part with me in it and just go to the book?
Well, I think it was a good conversation as I recall, but hell yeah, buy the book.
Okay. So listen, originally when we scheduled this conversation, we were going to talk about Gaza and Israel and some related free speech issues, speech code issues. Then the Charlie Kirk assassination happened. So we decided to break this into 2 conversations. So we're going to talk about Charlie Kirk. Go ahead and post that. Then we're going to talk about Gaza, Israel, and so on. As for the Kirk assassination, it's been, I guess, about 4 or 5 days. Everyone I know was either surprised or shocked by the Kirk assassination per se. But my question for you is, were you surprised that there was an act of violence of this kind of degree of salience that was partisan in nature, given where the country seems to have been heading?
I was a little taken aback by the intensity of it. I think the fact that this guy is an activist and is so important in the MAGA world, is young, and he's a devout Christian. He's organized this massive social media mediated universe of young conservative, I think that made it salient. It made it very salient, and it became a window onto some, I think, disturbing features of our contemporary political culture.
Mm-hmm. And how would you characterize those features?
Well, Matt Taibbi has a book called Hate Inc. Have you seen it?
I know of it. I haven't read it.
Yeah, I think he puts his finger on this thing. I mean, everybody has to be Hitler or a fascist or something. I mean, it becomes existential. I mean, you have this environment. Trump can't be allowed to be president. It's an existential event. I mean, so then you get this a kid, Kirk, and he becomes an evangelist. He becomes a kind of embodiment of this thing, and you shoot him dead. I mean, of course, I don't mean that subject, you shoot him dead, to be pointing a
That was
finger in
not an
any particular
exhortation.
direction.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't answer you. You asked me what I thought were the salient features, and I basically said it's a shocking uh, mobilization. Did you hear what his wife said in her remarks?
I'm not sure.
His work will carry on. I'm going to see to it. She made a public presentation. It was very angry, and your heart wrenched for this woman in this position. At least mine did. On the other hand, it was bellicose. It was, this ain't over.
Yeah. No, there were a number of comments like that. Elon Musk, in addressing some kind of, I guess, a MAGA-esque crowd in England remotely. Did you hear what he said?
No, tell me what he said.
It was something like, violence is coming for you and you better fight back, or something like that. I mean,
I think I did see that. I didn't remember exactly how it was worded, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that there's a tendency to feel existentially threatened, to see the other party, the other tribe, as existentially threatening. The example you gave was kind of left of center seeing right of center as existentially threatening, but it's gone in both directions, right? I mean, or would you, or do you see a big asymmetry there? Because I think both sides. Well, go ahead.
Well, I think Trump is the most powerful man in the world, and I think the election, the kind of the debacle for the Democratic Party, the sense of both triumphalism with Stephen Miller types running around, and also despair with grasping at straws. But no, I don't think the hatred problem is just the left hating the right. I read Victor Davis Hanson. He blames it on the professors. He's kind of got this generic this morning, this a condemnation of where these ideas come from, and this is being linked with the killing of that poor woman, that Ukrainian refugee woman in Charlotte, and I don't know.
I don't think that guy had any ideas in his head at all. I mean, look, I don't know, but he just seemed crazy.
Yeah. But he's a symbol of something, of the disorder, of the, which has been coddled, lenient judges, rationales being given by the studies departments and so on. You asked me for examples of hatred directed at the left from the right, and I'm trying to give them.
Do you see the problem as fundamentally symmetrical? I mean, like when you go on social media, if you do you see the same kinds of kind of inflammatory weapons and misperceptions and intentional sustaining of misperceptions, I would say sometimes, be happening on both sides equally?
You're leading the witness. I think what you want me to say is no, of course not. That I see the undermining of the discourse as being more likely a product of right wing. Trump himself is an embodiment of this. But I don't know that I agree with that.
I'm actually not leading the witness. You're a particularly interesting witness because you've been on kind of both sides of the ideological spectrum. I mean, as you document in your book, you've been on the left, you've been on the right, you've kind of gone back, and currently, I would say a lot of people associate you with a kind of anti-wokeism. Certainly, when the Glenn Show really started to gain momentum, partly via the conversations you had with John McWhorter, that was a lot of the vibe, right? And I don't mean that. I don't mean to sound like I'm diminishing it. I mean, you were earnestly concerned about issues of free speech on campus and a kind of oppressive, an intellectually oppressive environment there, and so on. But I mean, so anyway, have I characterized your history more or less accurately? And but I largely just want to say, no, I actually don't. I don't. The interesting thing about you is I don't expect you to say anything in particular. I'm genuinely curious as to what you're going to say.
Okay, yeah, you characterized me correctly as a anti-woke heterodox guy, and unfortunately, the clarity of those times has faded, and it's not 2020 anymore. It's not mostly peaceful protests, Black Lives Matter, and structural racism anymore. And so, yeah, I became John and I kind of voices of reason amidst the kind of anti-racism mania. So that's duly noted. But no, I think I don't know what I think exactly, Bob. John and I have this running argument about Trump. He says Trump is the end of the world, and I say he has a plurality of political support. It's a big country. There's scores of millions of people who are enthusiastically embracing this. The question is, what's up with that? Not a personalization of this thing. So I disagree with Andrew Sullivan and others about the thing. He said there were good people on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, on both sides of the debate about whether or not you take down a Confederate statue. Not on both sides of the debate about Jews will not replace us. He didn't say that.
I know. I actually wrote about that. I mean, it's interesting. There's a little bit of a tangent here. The precursor of my newsletter, the Nonzero newsletter, was called Mindful Resistance. It started at the beginning of the first Trump administration. And by mindful resistance, I meant fine to resist Trump, but don't overreact. Be deliberate and careful. Think about it, including, as you just suggested, think about why he became a phenomenon. What are the grievances that underlie support for him? And, I have since written, I think this was after it became a Nonzero newsletter, but I've written about the very event you're talking about, Charlottesville. It was, and look, I'm left of center, but it was misreported by mainstream media. If you look at what he said, he did say, right after saying there were fine people on both sides, he said, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis whom I condemn, whatever, unequivocally, or something like that. It was clear, and I did a piece on how the New York Times covered it and what he actually said. And what I'm really working around to is that, I think, first of all, almost nobody on the left knows that or thinks that the New York Times or anybody misreported this. Everyone in MAGA knows that they misreported it. And it's an example of a reaction to Trump. I mean, that kind of coverage in the New York Times, it's an example of a reaction to Trump that I think ultimately was not helpful for the resistance, because it only inflamed the people on the MAGA side. And it seems to me that in general, in these many years of growing polarization running up to the Kirk assassination, you see on both sides what they're doing in reaction to each other that are just making things worse. You just see the positive feedback cycle. This kind of reporting in mainstream media is one example. Another example I see right now on the right is to look at this assassination, which, for all we know, so far at least, is one crazy guy. I mean, loosely speaking, he had an ideology that I think that he thought he was serving, and it looks like it was a left-wing ideology, but still obviously kind of an unhinged guy. Almost nobody actually ever plans to assassinate anybody. And so far as we know, he's acting alone. And yet, I'm sure you've heard a number of people in on the MAGA side talking as if this is this was like orchestrated, or this guy speaks for millions and millions of people in some sense. And I'm sure he has supporters. I'm sure there were some people who expressed glee, but this is something I see too. The other side, and social media encourages this, both sides, they'll look at something done by one extremist, and of course, social media always puts the spotlight on the extremists from each side, and they attribute the view or the act to a much larger group of people on that side. At this point, I'm just doing stream of consciousness, but the point is, anyway, where we left off was your point about Charlottesville, and it just seems to me like there is this positive feedback cycle. Both sides are actively involved at this point, and I'm just concerned that there may not be a way back.
Well, it would appear to me that a way back would require leadership, and I'm not sure where that would be coming from at this point. Certainly not from Trump himself, who's blaming the left and doesn't inspire. I say this despite everything that I had said just a moment ago. I mean, he was elected. He does have a following, but he doesn't inspire confidence as a kind of grave, for the ages, sage, elder, wise person who can guide the country through this treacherous path. But I want to question the validity of is it more the left or the right? I mean, even if it were more excessive on one side or the other, you still need two to tango. So they're feeding on each other in a certain sense. And I mean, neither side really does it, concedes the legitimacy of the other.
Yeah. No, it seems to get worse and worse. In terms of leadership, when I saw this guy, Cox, the governor of Utah, is it Spencer Cox? I was not aware of him, but when I just saw him talking at the press conference, I thought, look, if this assassination elevates his profile within the Republican Party, that will be one good thing that came out of it, because he seems like a grown-up. I mean, he's not maybe giving exactly the message I prescribe, but geez, he just seems like such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Even though he's blaming leftist ideology, and I'm left of center, and I guess what I would I wish he might have more often said, this guy seems to have been in the grips of leftist ideology, but of course he could have been in the grips of far right ideology. People on that side have committed crimes. I'd like to hear a little more than that, but basically, he just seems like a sober, reasonable person who would like to have a healing message. And, lately, these are not the kinds of people who have been elevated in the conversation, really on either side, but certainly not, I would say, in MAGA land.
I like what I've heard from the governor of Utah. I was going to say, Bob, I'm thinking of Russiagate. I'm thinking of two impeachments. I'm thinking of Nancy Pelosi tearing up her copy of the State of the Union address on national television.
Yeah.
I'm thinking they tried to kill him. I say they with quotation marks around it.
Right.
In Butler, Pennsylvania. And a lot of people were sad that the shooter missed. And I'm seeing the Kirk assassination in the context of this. He is, as I say, this fair-haired boy, this kind of wunderkind of the movement. and he's gunned down in cold blood, shot in the neck in whatever, in the most gruesome way. On live television, you can see the bullet going in. And I'm trying to imagine myself being one of these dyed-in-the-wool MAGA types. The thought that they're after me, and you ask me to split the difference and don't Democrats get shot too, wouldn't move me in the least. And especially given that the main organs of cultural articulation are 7-1 biased against this guy. I'm talking about Trump. So, I mean, let me put it this way, Bob. I wonder how you react to this. He's a historic figure in American politics. He's perhaps the most important president of my lifetime. I was born in 1948. He's the most powerful man in the world. They call him a clown. Again, I'm trying to imagine what it feels like to be a supporter of Donald Trump who witnessed Charlie Kirk get gunned down. That's not okay. That's not respecting me. So I'm against the racial reckoning of the George Floyd thing. So I'm against the transgender thing. I'm a Christian. And I pray. I believe in God. I go to church. I read the Bible. I admire Charlie Kirk's Christian walk. I don't get no respect in the halls of cultural power in this country. I'm alienated. I'm angry. I'm resentful. I'm mad as hell. And then you kill this guy?
Yeah.
So, I reiterate.
And we should emphasize that everything you just said was in the voice of an imagined MAGA supporter, because I know you left the church, so I know that couldn't be you when you were.
No, I'm channeling it. I'm trying to feel it.
Now I will say, in terms of insults of Trump and so on, I think it's fair to distinguish between Trump 1 and Trump 2. As I said, during the first Trump administration, I had this newsletter, Mindful Resistance. I saw all this overreaction, including Russiagate. I said, look, we don't know. I haven't seen a smoking gun. You're just going to look like a fool if we get to the end and there isn't a smoking gun. Just for now, let's just be agnostic about it. But tons of people went overboard and did look like fools in the end. That said, he, to me, this time around, is genuinely a much more menacing figure in the sense of threat to democracy, to the republic. He's pushing the envelope in terms of centralization of power as fast as he can on as many fronts as he can. And I think that's one thing that's happened, is that he's a different guy. I mean, he has filled his administration with loyalists this time. He's not going to be a prisoner of the establishment this time. And he, I think, has no respect for the norms that a lot of us think have been important in keeping this a liberal democracy. And I'm genuinely worried. Okay. What worried me last time around was the overreaction to him, because he didn't seem to me yet like a genuine threat. And honestly, I think if there hadn't been the overreaction, he might not be president right now, but he is. And I just do want to say, I don't think you're crazy to be worried. And I myself have said things at least as insulting this time around as this guy's a clown. So anyway, that's just my thing.
Well, I was trying to devil's advocate against my own argument and envision what people would tick off, the ICE mobilization, the tariff thing where he uses a phony emergency power claim to start setting tax policy. The judge who says, turn the planes around, and he basically says, fuck you. I mean, and many other things besides, and the lack of firing the Bureau of Labor Statistics commissioner. It's kind of willful flouting of power and disregard for precedent. I was trying to imagine what the other argument might be. And yeah, he is pushing against the boundaries on a number of fronts. The independence of the Fed. So we've got a Department of War now, not a Department of Defense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that was mainly just a full disclosure thing. So I want to, as you know, I called your attention to something that I'd like to let people hear. This thing that Charlie Kirk said about affirmative action. Did you have a chance to listen to that? I can play it now.
I did. I saw.
And I want to me, it illustrates both sides. Well, two different dynamics, both of which are problematic. One of which, in this case, is coming from the left. And the other is, I think, coming from Charlie Kirk. And I want to emphasize before I say this, and you may have a totally different view of this, and that's why I want to hear what you have to say, that obviously, if I just want to distinguish between explaining why things happen, the issue of why things happen, and the issue of culpability. To say that there's anything, including maybe something that came out of Charlie Kirk's mouth, that increased the chances that this assassin would commit the crime he committed, to say that is not to absolve him of blame. He's the guy who did it. He's the criminal. Charlie Kirk did not deserve what happened to him. But I do want to, I want to play something where I personally think, on the one hand, I think what he said was symptomatic of a lot of kinds of things that a lot of people say now that is not that helpful. On the other hand, it was misrepresented by on social media, and I think that's part of the problem. So the misrepresentation is, so this is like a tweet, and whoever tweeted it, and it now has 17,000 retweets, 59,000 likes. And this person writes in quotation marks, attributing this to Charlie Kirk, quote, "Black women do not have brain processing power to be taken seriously. You have to go steal a white person's slot." Now, as you know, that's not exactly what he said. Again, I'm not a fan of what he did say, and we can talk about that. But
why don't we see what he did say? So that
yeah. Okay, so here we go.
Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. Play cut 52.
But I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action, and particularly in higher education. I may have been admitted on affirmative action, both in terms of being a woman and a woman of color, but I can declare that I did not graduate on affirmative action. This is my personal story.
I hear because of action affirmative. She can't even say that. We know. It's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. This is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. They think we're like, of course, that's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. Of course. Oh no, imagine the world without Joy Reid. Imagine the world without Sheila Jackson Lee or Michelle Obama or Ketanji Brown Jackson. They think this is persuasive. They think, as they kind of now reveal that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies. that turned me into a bitter, resentful activist that hates white people, honestly, through.
Okay, so that's the entirety of the
You
clip.
know who
It was
that reminds
originally,
me of? You know who that reminds me of? That reminds me of Rush Limbaugh.
huh?
Almost
Would
the
he have-
tone of voice, the rhythm, the ridicule, it reminds me of Rush Limbaugh.
Would he have said those things? We know you listed 4 black people and said, we know you do not have the brain processing power.
It was ugly. What he said was ugly. It was ungenerous in the extreme. It was disrespectful. It was contemptuous and contemptible, a person could say. But I don't think it was racist, Bob. I think that's kind of what I'm being asked here. And I certainly don't think it's the kind of thing you can say, see there, a guy who says something like that shouldn't be surprised if somebody wants to shoot him. Because there's more than a grain
I don't mean that, but
no, let me just make my point. There's more than a grain of truth in what he said. That's what I'm getting at. The affirmative action regime, and I'm not just talking about the preferences that are given at the expense of some, quote, more meritorious or deserving candidate. I'm also talking about the self-justifying denigration that people enter into as they attempt to legitimate the regime. I am proud to announce that I'm affirmative. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for affirmative action. Have they got any idea what they're saying? They're licensing a guy like Charlie Kirk to say, yeah, because you didn't have the chops. They assume the narrative is going to be the institution needed prodding in order to break down barriers that it was unwilling to acknowledge and allow a meritorious person like me to enter. But that's not persuasive. That's not persuasive at Princeton, where Michelle Obama went, that the institution needed prodding to open its doors to someone from the South Side of Chicago. I've actually read her undergraduate thesis. It's singularly unimpressive in sociology at Princeton. It's on the web. And the reason it's on there is because Charlie Kirk has got a point. Anyway, I'm saying affirmative action is corrupt. I'm saying it engenders resentment. I'm saying it invites ridicule. I'm saying there was a contradiction in saying I'm an affirmative action baby, but you better not think I'm less qualified than anybody else. So I don't like his tone. He's naming names. I think that's unseemly. He's basically calling people stupid. I mean, Michelle Obama has done pretty well for herself in life. But I hate that Black people are in the position of having to whine and cry and go screaming from the room when someone points out that we are relying on special dispensation in order to be included in the most competitive venues. The year is 2025. Look at what these Asian kids are doing, changing our lives, making our society for the 21st century, among others, of course. But I mean, that is what the game is really about. And to be in this position of, oh, Charlie Kirk, Ketanji Brown Jackson, God bless her, is a justice of the United States Supreme Court. She was done no favor when the president of the United States basically announced that he had a Black woman quota at the U.S. Supreme Court. That's the Supreme Court. Now, I don't know anything about the law. She has to labor under the knowledge that every opinion she writes is going to be examined to see whether or not it measures up. I wouldn't want that pressure. I've had it. I wouldn't want it. Anyway, that's what I think. I mean, you touched a nerve with me. I think.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I touched the nerve about your view of affirmative action, and which tells me, although you kind of denounced, in a certain sense, if not what he said, the way he said it, you weren't.
It was nasty, no doubt about it. It was hurtful. Yeah. I mean, and it was probably intended to be hurtful.
Well, that's what bothers me about that. That's what I think is symptomatic. Again, in this one like social media post, I see on both sides, the person on the left who posted it and Charlie Kirk, things that bother me. With Kirk, it is the fact that we're living in an environment, partly just because of the technological infrastructure of discourse, social media, and so on, where it's very easy to build a big following by appealing to some of the less noble parts of human nature. In this case, I think he must have known that in some people, as he said, that the racism button was being pushed and they liked it, right? Like he was not that far from saying "you dumb N-word," and that some of the people who resonated to what he said would have liked to hear that. Maybe I'm being too cynical. It seems to me you'd have to be pretty naive not to realize that of all the people who are responding positively to that, although some, as you did to the extent that you were positive, are responding to the substance. Others are responding for let's just say much less noble reasons. It happens on both sides. Both sides appeal to fear. Both sides appeal to a kind of bigotry. Sometimes it's about like rednecks in Middle America, and a lot of times it's a dog whistle, and they don't say it explicitly. But anyway, that's one thing that bothers me. The other thing is, again, the person who quoted him misquoted him. He did not say, quote, black women. So, and there is a difference. That would have been a flatly, unabashedly racist statement, in my view. He didn't do that. And, my wife, when I said this to her, she said, well, the lady who posted it isn't a journalist. And I thought, but in the social media age, in a way, if you're going to go on social media, you inherit the responsibilities of a journalist. Social media is this very influential thing, and any given person can suddenly be communicating with 100,000 people. So if the reason we expect clarity and honesty from journalists, and I'm not saying we always get it, but if the reason we expect it or ask for it is that they're influential, then it seems to me we all of us who go on social media should think of ourselves as journalists and try not to distort what people say. And that happens on both sides too, God knows. I see it on the right all the time. Quoting something somebody supposedly said, you watch the video, they didn't say quite that, and the difference matters. So.
I'm thinking about taboos. So what he said broke a certain norm about civility. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I'm thinking that there's a reason for the norm, and it is to discourage the kind of fever swamp, titillating kind of energy that you are fearful that he was playing to. I don't know that he was purposefully playing to that kind of energy, but I would concede that that is what you're going to get when you say something like that. A lot of people are going to be thinking exactly the thing that he didn't quite say, but that he was misrepresented as saying. But he invited that in a way by talking outside of the norm.
Mm-hmm.
So I just published a little book called Self-Censorship, which is a reprint of an old essay of mine together with some commentary. The essay is about self-censorship and about the taboos and the social constraints that we have on what we can say based on the idea that the only kind of person who would say something like that is a kind of person whose values, which I cannot directly observe, must be unsavory. And it creates all kinds of different dynamics. So people will be punished for saying things that are true. I got on the plane, the pilot was black. I know they have affirmative action, and I had a small thought in the back of my mind, just like if there were a bunch of obvious Middle Eastern people sitting in the first class section of the airplane as I walked past. A thought went through my mind, but You can't say that. You're not supposed to say that. And then someone comes along and says it, and just like the emperor has no clothes, you feel a sense of exhilaration and empowerment because finally something is being said that, you didn't want to have said. So, yeah.
Yeah, but although there's a way of making the point that one downside of affirmative action is that people are going to make judgments like that and say, I don't want to go to that doctor because I'm not sure he got into medical school on grounds of merit. I mean, there's a way of saying that isn't the way, that isn't the way what we just heard. Now, again, I'm not.
But it's ridicule. It's we've been at this for 50 years now,
I know. It's a fine line. But anyway, the generic thing that bothers me is that, when people on the left, they see this tweet and they either accept the quote as written, and I've run into somebody who quoted it to me who hadn't bothered to watch the video. Said, did you hear what he said about black women? So it works like that. Or people who watched the video and were maybe less outraged than they'd be if he had said what he was quoted as saying, but still were outraged. Then they themselves get into a mindset where it's easier to push their buttons by saying something outrageous, like generalizing from Charlie Kirk. See, they all believe this about black people and want to do that. It's just what bothers me is the positive feedback cycle.
Yeah, but I think that's also 20th century. I think we're past that. Do you ever watch Joy Reid? Have you watched Joy Reid?
Not much.
She plays the race card on a daily basis. Her presumption of racial entitlement and assumption of the fact that everybody agrees with this is insufferable. I mean, I can see being a Charlie Kirk devotee and catching some of her commentary, some of which I think could also be accused of being racist, anti-white racist. And I hear her taken down a notch, who would miss Joy Reid and thinking, yeah, right on.
Yeah, I heard you laugh during that part when he said, as if we couldn't get along without whatever he said about Joy Reid. I heard you chuckle.
Bob, the problem is deep. The problem is deep. Claudine Gay, president of Harvard University, is deposed by Christopher Rufo and company.
But not anymore, but that's our next conversation. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah.
No. Go ahead and say what you're going to say. I just mean that.
I'm just saying, in some sense, you're the president of Harvard University. You're a kind of in the upper echelon in the hierarchy of esteem for the academic excellence and exquisite erudition and all that. Of course, you're an administrator. It's just a day-to-day job. You're just but it's symbolic. When Larry Summers became the first Jewish president of Harvard University, I think people felt a lot of pride. And I think it's an interesting comparison. I mean, a lot of people hate Larry Summers' guts for a variety of reasons, but there's no denying that he's a distinguished economist. He's a very distinguished economist, had a stellar academic career long before he became Robert Rubin's right-hand man and ended up being Secretary of the Treasury and went to Wall Street and made a lot of money in investment banking and everything like that. Larry Summers is a world-class player in his field. Claudine Gay, not so much. People notice. To get deposed for plagiarism, it's humiliating. I'm just going to say that as an African-American, a prideful African-American. I can't hide behind the assumption that nobody is noticing or that they can't speak of it even if they do notice. That's not very good protection against the humiliation of people underperforming at the highest levels of requirement. So, then a guy like Kirk or a comedian comes along and says they're not qualified.
Let me just say one more thing. First of all, that clip of Kirk was taken from, I guess, God knows how many hours of footage. That was on his show. And he was doing a rant I have done rants, and I don't generally plan them, but when you feel there are people out there resonating with the rant, you can go farther than you might have realized you were going to go. So I just want to acknowledge all that. I'm not trying to indict him for this, but what I would say is what worries me about the time we're in is that because it's so easy to do rabble rousing, because social media and independent media and podcasts make it so easy. One way this is sometimes put, and I want to move, this is going to lead to a question to you, is that there are no longer any gatekeepers the way there were when, as you and I remember, there were 3 TV networks and so on. And one thing that worries me is that because extreme rhetoric is rewarded and there is a strong incentive for it, we've gotten to a place where what we need is the opposite. We need exemplary self-restraint on the part of influential people to speak clearly and soberly and say, without unnecessarily appealing to the base instincts of people. So we've gotten to a place where we need that, and yet the system continues to incentivize the opposite. And that is what worries me. Now, the question I was going to ask you, although you can comment on that if you want, is we've heard a lot of, I've heard some comparisons with the 60s. There was in one year, Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King were both assassinated. And one thing about you and me is we're actually both old enough to remember that. I was a kid in 68, but I remember it very clearly. And I was wondering, first of all, again, feel free to comment on what I had finished saying, but I was wondering what you think of the parallels people are drawing between the kind of unrest and tension we're seeing in the country now and the kind we saw in the late 60s and early 70s.
I think it's overstated. I think the 60s were much more radical. And I was in Chicago. I was 20 years old in 1968. I remember Watts 1965. I remember Newark. I remember Detroit. I remember in Chicago, 1968, April of 1968, the long hot summers, the Kerner Commission, the Black Panthers, the Symbionese Liberation Army, although that was the 70s. But I remember the Weather Underground. I remember bombs going on. I remember Kent State when National Guardsmen opened fire on college kids.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the culture. I remember, the kind of, themes that got taken up in popular culture. And the Last Poets, Rat and Bit My Sister Nell, and Whitey's on the Moon. This was what he put out after the moon landing.
Playing golf, no less. Remember the guys playing golf on the moon? It's like a country club. But anyway, go ahead.
Malcolm X, who was killed in 1965. The Black Panther Party.
Mm-hmm.
The Nation of Islam was big in Chicago. When I was a kid, they were somehow more present in my consciousness as a young kid going around in Chicago than I imagined they would be in anybody's mind today. But it was the 60s. It was we're not there yet, not by a long shot.
So you would say you think that was a more perilous moment in American history than we're at now?
Yeah, I do.
Well, that's encouraging.
J. Edgar Hoover and the COINTELPRO stuff and the Vietnam War. It was different, wasn't it? It just feels to me in recollection much more intense. The draft, much more disquieting than now. I can't imagine civil disorder collapsing, although civil order collapsing, I should say. Overthrow the government? I don't know if anybody's seriously talking about that.
No, if they are, they're deluded. There are people who worry about the opposite, of course, the government, Trump becoming, seizing power in a way inconsistent with the Constitution. I mean, it's funny, the 60s, again, I was a kid, but in 1968, my father was in the military. We moved to San Francisco. The Presidio was a military base then. So the next 3 years, 60, 69, 70, 71, I was in San Francisco and living on a military base, when Vietnam was kind of the main grievance in a way.
And Haight-Ashbury was right around the corner.
Haight-Ashbury, man, it was so wild. It was so wild. And what an interesting experience. Also, I'd never gone to school in an urban setting. I went, although I lived on base, I went to San Francisco public schools. Look, I mean, they were not ghettos, but the whole idea of an asphalt playground freaked me out, like, where's the grass? But it was wild times. I mean, the Black Panthers, I remember, at least according to what I was reading in the papers, they were handing out, they had a breakfast program for kids where, as reported in the papers, if I recall accurately, they were handing out coloring books. And one of the captions in the coloring book was, "The only good pig is a dead pig." These were like for kindergartners. It was, I definitely had a sense of things kind of coming undone. That's true. Now, on the other hand, because Vietnam was such a big part of that, just ending the war did a lot to deflate the tension, right? Because, I mean, you know what they say about Americans and foreign policy? Nobody cares about it unless Americans are coming home in body bags. And they started coming home in body bags in the 60s, and that did a lot to animate the protests. And then when that stopped, 1973 or whatever, you just, the air kind of came out of the whole thing. So we had said should we leave it here and call this one a wrap and move on to the second conversation about Israel? And because I know you're busy. Okay, so the conversation we're about to have, which is going to get into Israel and Gaza and free speech and speech codes, is, I think, your latest book, right? This about self-censorship?
It's called Self-Censorship. And yes, it's a small book, an essay that I published back in the 90s that people have called prescient, that has been refurbished and surrounded by a foreword and an afterword in which I discuss the problem of speaking one's mind candidly in public when you know that people are going to make judgments about you based on what they hear.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this has become an issue for you lately around the issue of Gaza and Israel. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. I mean, it's an issue for me around a number of issues. I mean, I worry about how I talk about President Donald Trump, about how I talk about the conflict in Ukraine, about how I talk about affirmative action, being an African American, about how I talk about religion, being a former confessing Christian who lost his faith. I mean, depending on the context, different issues will be more or less salient. And the generic phenomenon that I'm trying to analyze in the book is the way in which the foreknowledge that what one says will be examined and scrutinized for evidence of what one, quote, really believes, the consequences of that kind of pressure for the choices that a person has to make about what they say and how they say it and whether to say anything at all. And yes, the Israel-Gaza conflict is an arena in which I have felt especially constrained because people have such strong feelings about it. And one has to be very careful what one says, what words one uses, what generalizations and comparisons one makes and draws. And, it's fraught. It's a very fraught, discursive environment.
It is. And one reason, because, I mean, you just alluded to this thing where people try to infer on the basis of what you said whether there's more they can say about your actual beliefs or your actual character beyond what you said. And of course, with the Israel issue, the standard accusation is that you're anti-Semitic if people if you criticize Israel harshly and get taken a task for it. Now, you were on the Tucker Carlson show a few months ago and talked about a price that apparently you had paid. I'm not even sure it's so much for what you said as for some guests you had on your show, right? I mean, you, at that point, your show had a kind of sponsorship from the Manhattan Institute, as I recall, and you, kind of separate from that, were a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, I guess, and getting a stipend or something. Tell me if I've gotten anything wrong, and then if you can just recap the story.
No, you got it basically right. I had a relationship with the Manhattan Institute, which was remunerative for me. I was, in effect, a consultant. I was not visiting, a senior fellow, not resident in Manhattan, but collecting a non-trivial stipend. And they were generously supporting the podcast with resources that helped to underwrite the cost of carrying a team of able associates whom you are intimately familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an integral part. The Manhattan Institute relationship was an integral part of my sort of platform. I mean, I am now retired emeritus professor at Brown University, effective July 1st of this year. But I was not at the time, and as I envisioned the transition into post-professorial retirement, the Manhattan Institute was an important part of that picture in my planning. And yeah, they severed our relationship and did so in stages, as you suggest, first withdrawing support for the podcast and then asking me to find greener pastures as a senior fellow, which happily I'm able to report that I have done. And I now am affiliated with the Hoover Institution, where I'm a distinguished visiting fellow of a venerable West Coast organ, although not in residence. But in any case, that's something I said. I think it might have been a combination of things. I had Omer Bartov, the historian of the Holocaust, who's my colleague here at Brown University and who has a noteworthy piece. The piece was published after I had him on the show, but he was already the center of some controversy because he's a student of genocide, and he was concerned shortly after the war broke out in October of 2023 that Israel's prosecution of the war in Gaza, in the political context of that, had the risk of, he said early on, it wasn't quite what he would call a genocide, but it had genocide-like characteristics that he was worried about. And now he has eventually taken up the position, although, as I say, after I had him on the show, that, he says in the New York Times, I know genocide, I study genocides. Sorry to have to report this to you, but this is a genocide. This is Omer Bartov. He's Jewish, he's an Israeli, as it happens, an historian. Writes about the Nazi extermination campaign in Eastern Europe in granular detail. He writes these books. I haven't read his books. I had him on the show. And was asked by the staff at the Manhattan Institute not to mention in promoting that show that I was sponsored by the Manhattan Institute. And there was
and
no
this
other.
had been a standard thing. I mean, their brand was on your show every time, and
exactly.
they said, "Can you take it off for this episode?"
Indeed, they asked me to de-escalate the association for this particular show. Subsequently, Ta-Nehisi Coates, the writer's book, The Message, came out. It's a collection of essays writing, and one of them is about his experience on the West Bank, seeing the occupation in Israel-Palestine. And he wrote critical of the occupation in that book. And McWhorter, my conversation partner at the podcast, and I got into a back and forth about it, in which I acknowledged that I admired the writing. I thought it was both artful and also probative and morally serious and uh, uh, you know something that one should read. That I don't think went over very well. It certainly didn't go over well in the comments section, but I didn't hear anything from the Manhattan Institute people about that. But then I had another guest on to talk about a report by a UK-based research group called Air Wars that chronicles civilian casualties in aerial bombardment campaigns in contemporary warfare, and that had to put out a report saying that the civilian casualties engendered by the IDF bombardment campaign in Gaza were disproportionate, and that suggested a collective punishment characterization of the campaign being appropriate. And I had this young guy from the London School of Economics who was associated with the report on to talk about it, and along with Eli Lake, the journalist and
Yeah, I know Eli.
Israel-friendly guy who writes for the Free Press, and so who's a veteran correspondent covering the Middle East affairs. So he was, quote, the other side, and they went back and forth, but I had him on the show. Anyway, the long and short of it is, after that, I got a notification that not only were they not going to continue to support the podcast, but that they were parting company with me effective the end of the relevant period. So they severed the relationship. Do I know that it was my Gaza reporting that was at the root of it? No, but I can't prove it, but I know it's true, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you alluded to the fact that I know some of the people who work for you. And I've actually seen, kind of the timeline. I mean, you recited it in more detail on Tucker's show, but I've seen an even more fine-grained version of it. And yeah, the evidence seems pretty compelling. I mean, there are three different things. Can you take our branding off of this episode, and then we're going to end the sponsorship of the show, and then we're going to end the sponsorship of you. We're going to end your stipend. And if you look at the timing, suggestive, I would say, to put it mildly. The other thing I'd say is, I mean, you talked about this on Tucker Carlson's show. You mentioned Reihan Salam, the president of the Manhattan Institute, and how he got in touch with you and so on. And they never denied this, right? I mean, they I'm sure that got their attention.
No, they didn't deny it. Reihan said in the letter he didn't actually speak with me directly about separating, that they examined their fellowship associations for productivity and shared values, or words to that effect. So, I mean, that was an indirect statement that, I mean, it certainly wasn't productivity, because I, been producing and writing in their magazine and participating in their webinars and, doing the podcast, which is generating traffic and attention for the Manhattan. I was pulling my weight, to be sure. So if it wasn't productivity, it must have been shared values that I was falling short of.
Yeah, and the chairman emeritus of the Manhattan Institute is Paul Singer, who, and I think he's been a donor, who's kind of famously staunchly pro-Israel. I believe some of his money was behind the Weekly Standard, and so yeah, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, I actually was not aware of the Manhattan Institute kind of weighing in on Israel a lot. I think of them as doing mainly domestic policy, but anyway, yeah, it's conservative, and Paul Singer in particular is associated with pro-Israel causes. So you've had a chance to reflect on this, and I gather that, well, maybe you should back up and just ask you a little bit about your feelings about the Gaza war, or America's relationship with Israel, or whatever else you want to talk about, because I know that as you began highlighting at least some of these voices on your show who were critical of Israel, you got a certain amount of blowback from your some of the viewers and listeners of the Glenn Show, which, historically had been, had, I guess you could say, a right of center audience, in particular, kind of anti-woke audience, and in a certain sense, an anti-speech code audience, right? I mean, that to me is a little bit of an irony associated with getting blowback from them, just in the sense that a lot of the anti-woke energy was expressed as anti-speech code energy. There are these things you're not allowed to say on campus, and that's not right, because a campus should be a place where you can say whatever you want. And now, you're on the other, in a certain sense, you're on the other side of a speech code issue, right?
Well, that's an interesting way of put it, particularly given that my little book, Self-Censorship, is just out. Yeah, look, I'm not going to be able to give you a carefully articulated critical assessment of the war. I just thought too many civilians were being killed, too many atrocities were being reported. The tone of the discussion that I heard coming out of this Israeli leadership about what they were doing in Gaza was disquieting. And we could parse the different issues, tunnels, civilian human shields, Hamas. I just thought this is an asymmetric confrontation. They're in effect shooting fish in a barrel. Call me a sentimental, soft-hearted sap. I can't bear it. I can't bear it. And the triumphalism and the supremacism. I just made the word up. Rubbed me the wrong way. I thought the human shield argument was absurd. I thought it asked way too much of me. I'm not responsible for wreaking havoc here because the other guy put a baby up in front of me and I had to go through the baby to get to him. I thought, okay, maybe from your perspective, Israel's perspective, this is necessary. I'm an American, and it's not necessary for me to help you do it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, you dare me to actually invoke the context within which October 7th in particular, but the whole struggle that is generations old has arisen? Because there's a pat, fixed, straight narrative about that, which leaves you righteous in whatever you do, and I can't raise any question about that? It rubbed me the wrong way. Yeah, my audience is relatively conservative, and I think we're attracted because McWhorter and I were tearing down the Ibram X. Kendis of the world and the Nicole Hannah Joneses of the world, didn't have anything good to say about the 1619 Project, didn't like affirmative action. We're death on reparations for slavery and all of that, all those nostrums and those characters, and would take them down a notch or two. And I think people, I'm a national treasure, they would say in the comments. I may help them maintain their sanity when George Floyd riots were breaking out, and I was saying, cool it to the rioters. So they had certain expectations. And my deviance on this question, my sense of disquiet, it's not as if I'm pro-Hamas. But to say that I was pro-Palestinian, okay, maybe. Do I see the humanity of the Palestinians? Sure, I sure do. Do I feel anguish at their suffering? Yes. Yes, I do. Am I sympathetic to their aspiration? How could I not be? All they want is self-determination and, whatever. You're going to say they want to push the Jews into the sea? I'm going to say it's very convenient of you to characterize their humanity in that way when you got your foot on their neck. So it left a bad taste in my mouth, Robert. I mean, I honestly, you know, am not taking a sort of anti-Zionist stand here. It's almost like I'm saying, I used this in something I said early on my own show. I mean, if my neighbor next door had a squatter problem, people were in his property and he didn't want them in there, and he pulled out a machine gun and he started gunning them down. He's my neighbor, and I certainly have sympathy because I don't want the squatters coming into my place, but can I at least object to the slaughter?
Or say I'm not going to provide the bullets?
Yeah.
Because, one thing people say in response to the kind of thing you just said is, well, there are atrocities happening in country X and country Y, and you're not talking about those. And no, but America isn't sending the weapons and giving the country cover in the UN and everywhere else and saying, sure, you go ahead, attack whatever your country you want. We'll have your back. We'll attack them too, in fact, which Trump did with Iran. And so, yeah, I mean, as you know, I cannot be your antagonist on this issue. I guess I can play devil's advocate. And there are a lot of ways to play devil's advocate. I mean, I've long said, it's a little harder to say it now, but I started saying years ago, Israel is not responding to the threat they face any more crazily than America responded to 9/11 in terms of like level of over response. Now you might be able to argue that actually they are, but my point is, if you lived in Israel, it would be easy to feel very threatened and to feel existentially threatened. I understand that. I just happen to think that in addition to being inhumane in the ways you described, what they're doing is not in the long-term interests of Israel, or for that matter, of Jews around the world. But that's just me.
Well, I agree with that. I've talked to Peter Beinart about his book Being Jewish after the destruction of Gaza, and he was very compelling to me in making that point.
Yeah, Peter's been on my show. We were colleagues at the New Republic. Of course, he's Jewish and he's from South Africa. And I know he's not the only American Jew I know who is from South Africa, and for that reason has a special sensitivity to this issue. Tony Karen is another one who has a newsletter called Rootless Cosmopolitan. So have you talked like you're talking now, like on your show? Have you had? I mean, you hosted a debate between Eli Lake and somebody else. Have you had debates with the Eli Lakes of the world? I actually had one with Eli right after October 7th. I like Eli a lot. But have you?
I have not. And I have been exhorted to do so and have been reluctant to do so, to be honest with you. Many people have been suggested that I should have on to debate the issue, and I haven't felt like it's something I wanted to do.
Because of the reaction from your audience you anticipate?
No. I think, do I know enough to go toe-to-toe with somebody who does combat on this issue for a living? I guess I felt challenged by that. I thought, I'm not really interested. I mean, this is one of the things that might have gotten me in trouble with MI. After Eli Lake came on, I did one of these post-show conversations with Mark and Nikita, in which they kind of talked to me about the show, and we put it up as bonus content. And I was asked what did I learn from Eli Lake? And I said, what was I going to learn from him that was relevant to the thing? I mean, I already knew what he was going to say. So that is not exactly commendable in terms of the spirit of objective journalism, I know, but it's how I've decided to handle it.
You mean the decision not to pursue it much on your show? Or do you mean what you said about Eli?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's not a theme that I've taken up at the show as such. It's something that has come up. I've had, I've had the people on that I've mentioned that I've had, but they are, with the exception of Eli Lake and Noam Dworman.
I know Noam. I was just listening to his podcast last night. Have you thought about talking to actual audience members? I mean, you must have people in your audience who are particularly outraged. Do you ever have like Zoom calls or anything?
Yeah, we're doing these live stream things once a week now for a couple of hours on a Friday evening. And I can think of the correspondent's name, the person who calls into the show. His name is Scott Kushner. And he and I have had a back and forth about it. And he admires Glenn Loury, he respects Glenn Loury, but he wishes that I would take seriously the following set of considerations. And he allows that, he makes the argument that he makes. Another caller, his name is Mark Altshuler. He said, the Jews have got guns this time. That's the line of his that I remember. Never again, it's going to mean never again. We got guns this time.
Yeah, I think that captures a sense of threat that is not surprising given what happened in Germany in World War II. But again, I think can be counterproductive if the actual level of the threat you face is not kept in perspective. And right now, I don't think Israel faces any kind of security threat at all, with the possible exception of the blowback from the current policies. But that's just me. Now, the speech issue is kind of separate from all this. We've been talking about Gaza and Israel, but there's a separate question as to what does and does not constitute anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic speech, and that has been changing. I mean, you may remember when Jimmy Carter had a book called Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And I believe in the book, he didn't even say Israel was practicing apartheid. And I will say, if you've been to the West Bank, you can see how someone could say that. I mean, you got roads the Palestinians can't drive on. You've got, it's a lot of the hallmarks of
that's what
apartheid.
Ta-Nehisi Coates was writing about.
Yeah, no, he went there and was struck by some of the things I was struck by when I went there. But Carter, I don't think at that point was even saying that they were practicing apartheid. He was just saying, this is where it's headed in the West Bank. You can't keep building these settlements without having to make a decision at one point. And I can see one road leading to flat out apartheid. And I don't know if you remember the controversy, but he had to apologize, basically walk it back. The Anti-Defamation League, whose functions I think include enforcing a speech code about Israel. Frankly, I don't know if you've had any run-ins with him, Glenn, but
not specifically, although I know that's what they do. This is in the context of the United Nations resolution of equating Zionism with racism. I remember the World Conference Against Racism in Durban in 2001. That issue was drawn. The United States actually didn't send the Secretary of State, who was Colin Powell, an African-American, to South Africa to that conference because of that controversy. I think the use of the word apartheid the evocation of South Africa, the implicit equivalency that's being drawn between the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the one hand and the struggle of Black South Africans for liberation, which had been successful and had been in response to world condemnation. That's what I think is going on in terms of the vitriolic, hyperbolic reaction to any use of the term apartheid. I think the same with respect to the word genocide and its application to the campaign, the effects of the campaign in Gaza now. So yeah, I think there are taboos about words.
Yeah. Now, it is changing. I think really, honestly, you don't get into much trouble for the word apartheid anymore because they're so busy fighting off use of the word genocide, which I actually haven't applied to Gaza yet for reasons I won't get into. I mean, there's certainly war crimes being committed there. Forced displacement is a war crime. They seem to be bent on the wholesale ethnic cleansing of Gaza. There's ethnic cleansing going on in the West Bank. But genocide, I don't know. And I'm curious actually about your experience. I just grew up equating genocide with an attempt to actually exterminate a whole ethnic group. And, what these people say is, well, they'd be happy for the Gazans to just leave Gaza, right? And that's true. That's not the same as killing them all, I guess. But did you, I think there's been an evolution in the discourse about international law as to the meaning of the word genocide. Is that your sense that the word is more loosely applied now than it was 30, 40 years ago?
Yeah, you think about Rwanda or you think about the Nazi Holocaust, people being put in the ovens and gas chambers and so on. You don't think about a military campaign against the insurgency, a terrorist group, quote unquote, which has heavy civilian casualties. You don't necessarily think about that. I don't use the word myself. I'm not objecting to the use of the word, but it's not like I go run around saying, you support genocide of an American politician who votes for funds for military aid to Israel. But it's a test. The use of the word is a test. Like, can't I make some pretty valid inferences, at least roughly, about where a person stands on broader issues of Israel and Zionism and anti-Semitism from their willingness to use the word or their scrupulous avoidance of using it? So when I then think about the use of the word, it's not a technical definition. Does this fit within a certain Geneva Treaties characterization of what it takes? Check the boxes 1, 2, 3. It's rather, am I one of those people? Am I one of the people who are willing to be associated with the word? And that's kind of how I would analyze it from the point of view that I developed in this book that we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, given the way the word is used now, I don't think it's crazy to apply it to Gaza. I mean, the official position of the U.S. State Department is that China is committing genocide, against the Uyghurs. And these are very different kinds of situations, but I do think that on balance, and of course, we don't know as much about what's happened there as it would be good to know. But I had an expert on and talked about it and tried to get a sense. And it does seem to me, if you're going to call that genocide, although again, it's a little bit of an apples and oranges thing, it's certainly not crazy to call Gaza genocide. One reason I don't do it is because I imagine, like, being Israeli, and, because to them, genocide means the Holocaust, understandably. It means, rounding up millions of people and executing them, and so I can understand how they would react, like when you apply the word genocide to something that's very different, that it just makes it so easy for them to say, man, you do not understand the first thing about our history, do you? You do not understand the first thing about our situation. And
sure, because it's as if you're equating the one to the other, and they,
right.
of course, and perhaps rightly, think their experience is much more egregious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but I don't know. There's so many things. You know, the speech code has really loosened. I mean, it's weird. It has and it hasn't. On the one hand, there are things that you used to get into trouble for saying. Like, it used to be that if you said what Israel does is contributing to anti-Semitism, that was considered, or you would be condemned for being anti-Semitic. And that didn't make sense to me because although it's true that if someone becomes anti-Semitic or more anti-Semitic in response to something the Israeli government does, that doesn't make, well, it never makes sense to be a racist or bigot of any kind. But I mean, it doesn't make sense because Israel is the nation that is Zionist, but it's not all of the world's Jews. So if you hold the world's Jews responsible for something Israel does, that's a kind of conflation of Israel and the Jewish people. It doesn't make any sense, of course. But the fact is, you know that there are anti-Semites or potential anti-Semites who will, in fact, react that way. They will make that conflation. And yet, if you just said that, say, hey, I'm worried that certain Israeli policies will lead certain people by virtue of this illogical conflation to become more anti-Semitic, it used to be that was actually condemned as anti-Semitism itself. But now I've heard, I think that rule has changed. I've heard fairly pro-Israel Jews express concern about that. And so I guess it's legit. So the point is just the speech code changes. But at the same time, the means of enforcement of the speech code have in some ways, reached new levels of harshness in terms of some things the Trump administration is doing, trying to deport people for writing op-eds and, immigrants, of course. And I would say, getting university presidents. I'd be interested in your take on this as somebody who has been immersed in academia. Like, would you say that there has been the successful intimidation by the Trump administration and maybe in some cases by donors like Bill Ackman of professors? Has speech been chilled on campus among students or professors?
I don't have systematic evidence about it, but my impression is, and bear in mind that I am emeritus professor here at Brown now, is that yes, it has been that people are being careful because they know that they're being watched. I think the fact that the presidents of Columbia, Harvard, Penn, MIT, they've all come under the gun. Elisa Stefanik asked whether having the chant "From the River to the Sea," which she construes as calling for the genocide of the Jewish people, is contrary to acceptable speech governance at their institutions. And they give a legalistic answer depending on the context, using those words might or might not be protected speech. But Zoran Mamdani is now being asked to give an account of his refusing to condemn, this kind of thing. Anyway, your question was chill on the climate of expression in universities, and I think so. I'm here at Brown. There's a Middle Eastern Studies department. It's pro-Palestinian. I think that's not disputable in its general tone. And there's somebody who has a newsletter which is all about how anti-Semitic is the Middle Eastern Studies department at Brown. And it circulates. And, if I were a faculty member in that department, it's like an enemies list. I mean, my name is on the list. I'm And the president of the university is constantly being harangued about why do you tolerate this kind of presence in your midst and all of that. I actually had lunch with a guy, a young man whose name I don't remember now, a young 40-year-old academic who's a director of the Brown Middle Eastern Studies. He's a very mild-mannered and unassuming guy, very decent guy, hardly a flaming terrorist supporting radical. But he has to manage an environment in which that kind of pressure is being brought to bear. I can't imagine, but that it doesn't affect what students say. I mean, in the classroom, you have Jewish students. They're outspoken. They are very opinions in terms of their commitment to Zionism and their defense of the actions of the Israeli state. Uh, you don't want to gratuitously offend your students or make them feel unwelcome or unsafe. I would be loath to go on a rant like the one that I did earlier in this conversation in front of my students for that reason.
Do you
So,
have any
yeah.
sense for, I mean, you often hear that older American Jews are pretty, by and large, pretty pro-Israel, but it's a very different story among younger American Jews. I mean, certainly judging by the Jewish friends of my daughters who are on the left, you would think that that's the case. I mean, they all went to the same pro-ceasefire demonstrations and everything. But do you have a sense for what like the ratio is of college? These would be college age American Jews at Brown, and of course Brown historically has been left of the average Ivy League school, I guess. But do you have any sense for the relative frequency of pro-Israel
Not
versus
a quantitative estimate, 2 to 1, 3 to 1. I think there's a range of opinion. I have a Jewish student who's very sympathy and passion for the Zionist cause, complaining to me about her Jewish friends who are shunning her, not inviting her to social events and whatnot because she's, quote, a Zionist, close quote. These are all Jewish people. So, I mean, my impressions are based upon what people are willing to say in the classroom, and I don't know everybody's ethnic identity. I'm not going to ask them, "Are you Jewish or not?" Some of people will say, as a Jewish person, I think this or that, but you can have your suspicions based on names and all of that. But I don't know. I just know that when there was a takeover of the sit-in at the president's office and students were taken into custody and led to a bus that the authorities had assembled outside the building and taken away, a lot of them were Jewish.
So you said it sounded like you had some interaction with people in your audience at the Glenn show who were not wild about some of the views about Gaza that had been aired either on your show or even by you. Have you, I think I asked you this, but I believe it was before we started taping wrong, but have you tried engaging them in just the free speech part of just the speech code part of the question? Like, okay, whatever you think about Israel and Hamas, if you opposed the attempt by the woke to impose a speech code on campuses, do you or do you not oppose what President Trump has done with respect to pro-Palestinian speech or criticism of Israel on American campuses? Has that issue been aired?
It has not in any kind of systematic way. If you're asking me, would I oppose it? Absolutely, I do oppose it. And I do think there's an irony here, particularly for me, because I've built a following based upon advocating for free speech. I can remember in 2020, after George Floyd died, was killed by Derek Chauvin, my university president wrote a dear colleague letter that she sent around to the university community, the alumni, students, as well as faculty and staff. And she basically said the values of this university are the same as the values of the Black Lives Matter movement. She didn't say it in those words, but that's kind of was the message. And I thought this is a terrible thing, and I spoke out against it. And the silencing of conservative voices on campus is something that I've inveighed against, and I think viewpoint diversity is a really important component of putting together an intellectual community that is able to meet all of our responsibilities effectively. And so on. And on the race questions, as I've already indicated, been a critic of the woke mantras that are nearly universally affirmed on university campuses are, again, 90-10 kind of disproportion against expression of those views. So yeah. So speaking up in a way that's critical of Israel, leading to cancellation or condemnation or the accusation of being anti-Semitic, or the administrative imposition of the university in the case of op-ed writer being deported, or the Middle East Studies departments being put in receivership. We don't like that. The way that Columbia University's Middle Eastern Studies department teaches settler colonialism, we want to do something about that. It seems to me those are clear line-crossing interventions that are attempting to control what's being said. I would even go so far as to say that the condemnation of student protests against what's going on in Gaza, not the objection to students occupying buildings or preventing people from getting into class, but just the idea that they would assemble and would give voice to they're pro-Hamas, they're terrorist lovers, right, or things like that. That's very unfortunate, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now you probably know Bari Weiss, right?
Yeah, I know Bari Weiss.
I've never met her. I've written about her, and I emailed her after what I wrote and didn't hear back. But understandably, but I've always thought she kind of represents the paradox. On the one hand, she has crusaded against speech constraints as applied by what she sees as the woke. On the other hand, she says that Ilhan Omar is an anti-Semite because she said, you remember the episode with It's All About the Benjamins? She was asserting that a congressperson's vote had been in response to money from a lobby. In this case, the lobby was AIPAC. She may have been right, she may have been wrong, but it seems to me to call that anti-Semitic. I mean, even if you want to argue that, okay, but there is this anti-Semitic trope about Jews, there being some conspiracy to control politicians and everything. I mean, I'm sorry if you see that relationship between what Ilhan Omar said and crazy conspiracy theories, but to say that a congressperson is influenced by a lobby is just not crazy. I'm sorry. And,
well, she may be, I mean, in the first instance, Benjamin refers to Benjamin Franklin, who's on the $100 bill. And
right.
So it's not Benjamin, the Jewish guy who happens to have that name. But beyond that, it's about money. And the implication, of course, is that Jewish money coming from Jewish people who are attempting to influence American policy is influencing the Congress. So it's not just that money is influencing the Congress. It's that money coming from Jewish people is influencing the Congress. Mm-hmm. That's what she's condemning.
Yeah, but it seems to me that that's an undue constraint on speech.
Well, it's ironic in the extreme because money is coming from Jewish people to influence Congress. And if you believe John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt,
If you believe AIPAC itself, they brag about their influence.
They brag about it. That's where I'm going.
You go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that maybe this is mildly in defense of Ilhan Omar. God help me. If I'm an inner city congressional representative, and say I have a district in St. Louis or Atlanta or Houston or New York, which is mostly minority people. I'm a Democrat,
mm-hmm.
and I'm Black, and I utter the wrong phrases. I express some sympathy with the Palestinian struggle. I have some criticism of Israel. There's a very good chance that I'm going to be facing an extremely well-funded primary challenge the next time I look around. And where's that money going to be coming from? Well, it's going to be coming from AIPAC or AIPAC-affiliated adjacent sources who have their interests, and they certainly have a right to express themselves according to the Supreme Court by using their money. But who speaks for those people who are their constituents, who are the working class and low income and minority people, and what do they actually think? This is not the people choosing their politician. This is the influencers choosing the politicians for the people. And I thought the point of the Voting Rights Act was that minorities were going to have representatives of their own choosing. I'm being a little flippant here, but only just a little.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I haven't seen the latest on this story, but you've probably read that Bari Weiss may wind up running CBS.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. Big buyout, corporate stuff.
Larry Ellison's son,
David Ellison, yeah.
Yeah, after a lot of hard work as a billionaire's son, scrounged up the money to buy Paramount, which owns CBS. And so apparently, that might influence CBS News's coverage.
Well, let me say this. I think the free press that Bari Weiss has built after leaving the New York Times editorial page is a very impressive piece of journalistic entrepreneurship. I mean, I think she's done a good job. I actually read their content, and it's a real organization. You can disagree with her about this or that, but I think some credit is due to instead of what is Nicole Hannah-Jones doing now? Does anybody know who she is?
Where is she still at the New York Times or not?
I don't know, but I think she's teaching at Howard. She is the progenitor of the 1619 Project. But I can imagine she and Bari Weiss would have locked horns a lot when they were both at the Times on opposite sides of the aisle. I don't know as much about this perhaps as I could, but I'm just saying her imprint, Nicole Hannah-Jones's and Bari Weiss's, if you say the class of 2010 or whenever it was that they signed on at the New York Times, Bari's way out ahead. And not just because of nepotism, but because of her own resourcefulness.
Yeah, that's true. I could make some criticisms of free press, and I may within the next few sentences. I would also say, look, it's impressive. I couldn't do it. I could not, via any means whatsoever, build up a journalistic organization like that in such a short period of time. That said, she had a lot of money from people who I think were ideologically motivated, and maybe largely by the anti-woke thing. But I mean, she got money from Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen Horowitz does not invest, as part of its normal portfolio in journalistic outfits that may someday hope to break even, which is the kind of thing she's running. So there, I would just say, I would also say, for the same reason, I don't think ordinarily Paramount would pay $200 million for something whose balance sheet looks like, I suspect, Free Press is actually
I've heard
works.
that criticism. The numbers don't add up.
No. And I'll also say there was this one piece. I'm sorry. I shouldn't get it, but there was this piece they ran, Free Press ran, called "I was stabbed in the eye because I'm a Jew." And there were some problems right away with this, one of which was the woman who wrote it showed up on TV almost immediately, and you couldn't even see like a nick anywhere around her eye. Okay. And then some video emerged. There was a demonstration at Yale. There was a pro-Palestinian demonstration. Then some video emerged of what had happened, and some Palestinian guy was like waving a flag back and forth as he marched forward. And then the smartphone camera that took the video was very close to where this woman had been, because you could hear her say "ouch" or something. And it's possible that the flag, that he was waving it intentionally kind of in their faces to piss them off or something, because maybe they were identifiably pro-Israel or something. But it's just, I had Paul Bloom on my podcast said he didn't even think it was intentional. In any event, there's just no way this was being stabbed in the fucking eye. I'm sorry. And they never issued a correction. It became increasingly clear it wasn't true. They never issued a correction. They finally changed the headline to something like "I was stabbed in the eye at Yale." But, am I making too big a deal out of this? Look, I admit, I'm sure part of it is jealousy, because nobody has bestowed on me however much money they bestowed on Bari Weiss for the free press to start the free press. Although, again, I admit I couldn't do. I would waste it in a way she hasn't. I would fail. But am I making too big a deal? It was just so ridiculous. As the truth
sounds
came
like
out.
You're serious about journalistic standards, and you object to seeing them disregarded.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to put it that way, as opposed to accusing me of being beset by rank jealousy. So, I don't know. Anything else? Yeah, it seems like we haven't really. I guess I. So look, the speech code is changing in many ways. There's an irony in many ways that make the code itself less constraining. The code surrounding Israel. You can say apartheid. You can say a few other things, and yet the enforcement mechanisms seem to me to be getting more draconian than they used to be, if that makes sense. Largely at the hands of the Trump administration.
You think they're overplaying their hands, that the enforcers are going to be surprised at the extent to which their influence wanes as people, object to the, don't believe your lying eyes, don't cross this line, whatever. I mean, can they end up, overdoing it?
I mean, it's hard to say. I'm more cynical than I used to be about money and power ultimately prevailing.
I mean, excuse me for interrupting, Bob. We were talking about Charlie Kirk.
Mm-hmm. In that first part of this, and that part will have been posted as a separate conversation, but yeah.
Okay, yes. In a previous conversation, we were talking about Charlie Kirk. And I remember seeing, I just did a little bit of looking into Charlie Kirk after he was shot, a conversation he had with Megyn Kelly,
mm-hmm.
in which they were complaining about, they're both arch strong supporters of Israel, and have been demonstrating that in their podcast over time. But they had a question, or they had a deviation of thought of one sort or another, and they found a ton of bricks falling down on them from Israel-friendly sources as a consequence of that, and they had it up to here. And that kind of backlash is, it seems to me, a latent potential for the speech code enforcers.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more openly expressed resentment about the speech code and the enforcers A lot of it a certain amount of it in the MAGA right. Steve Bannon, as you said, Charlie Kirk. Now he had traditionally, I think, been a very strong supporter of Israel, but
Yeah.
he was doing, I guess, some soul searching or something. Tucker Carlson had you on his show to tell, in part, one of the things you told was your story about the Manhattan Institute. And that is, and that may be, in terms of affecting the current policies that enforce a speech code to the extent that they do, which is to say Trump's policies. I mean, he's pretty much, that will be more significant than whatever is happening on the left, that you're getting this pushback from parts of the MAGA coalition. That said, Trump so far seems completely unwavering in his support for Israel. I mean, if it's true that Israel did not give him a heads up, did not ask what he thought about attacking Qatar, and it's already business as usual, which it is. I mean, he's going through the motions of saying, we're really upset. Well, he says the same thing about Biden. Oh, Joe's really upset now. And look, if you're really upset, you've got a big lever. You provide the weapons, okay? If you're really upset, you got a way to show it. And if it's true that that Bibi Netanyahu pays basically no price for attacking a country with an American military base in it and not giving us a heads up, then Trump's support for Israel just seems unshakable. And he's been very honest about how transactional it is and about how much money he got from Miriam Edelman and how she would come into the Oval Office and ask for things for Israel. And he'd say, Miriam, I already gave you X, Y, and Z, and she'd want more and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. Now, that's a separate issue from the speech stuff. I certainly don't see any signs that Trump is letting up on that or on the pressure he's putting on the universities. You'd know before I would. You're paying more attention to that realm. So,
no, I think you're right.
I don't know. Now, I don't think it's good for Israel in the long run, because, there are significant generational differences and old people eventually die. But right now, there's a huge amount of power and money concentrated among the older generation that I think is intent on keeping things the way they've been. So we'll see. I don't know. Any closing thoughts?
Well, thanks for conversing with me for 2 of your episodes. I am grateful for the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing the conversations at some remove.
Well, I appreciate you taking time. I know you're busy. Do you want to tell us what you're busy with, or is it just the usual?
Well, there's a conference at the Hoover Institution where I'm a distinguished visiting fellow in October, honoring the great economist Thomas Sowell, who is a fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he's 95 years old. He's published dozens of books about social inequality and race and culture, and also about political philosophy. And he's in the classical liberal spirit that one associates with people like Friedrich von Hayek. And I'm tasked with helping organize the conference and producing a paper to talk about his work. So that's what I'm focused.
Just have ChatGPT write the paper, Glenn. In fact, have it organize a conference. Get the premium version, pay for the premium version, and have it organize a conference. Someday, maybe. Well, thanks so much, Glenn. And everybody should buy your books, Late Admissions and Self-Censorship. That's the actual title, right? Not just the subject?
Yeah, that's the title, Self-Censorship.
And they should check out The Glenn Show. And we will see you down the road.
Thanks, Bob.